Tom Silva, the master carpenter and contractor beloved by millions through This Old House, has finally stepped forward to put an end to the rumors that have shadowed him for years. For decades, he carried a truth close to his chest while fans whispered and wondered. But how exactly does a man spend more than 4 decades in the public spotlight, earn a reputation built entirely on honest craftsmanship, and still manage to keep something so significant hidden from the world? Get ready, because we're about to pull back the curtain on the real story behind one of America's most trusted builders. Let's dive in. Tom Silva didn't find his calling under television lights or through some dramatic career-defining moment. His story began far more quietly, in the modest neighborhoods of Lexington, Massachusetts, long before words like expert or icon were ever attached to his name. The man who would one day teach a nation how to fix, restore, and build started out as an ordinary boy in a working-class community, breathing in the smell of sawdust and wood shavings like it was second nature. Funny, isn't it, how the most extraordinary journeys tend to grow from the most unremarkable of beginnings? Construction wasn't something Tom stumbled into. It was woven into the very fabric of his upbringing. His father, a builder through and through, never once thought about enrolling young Tom in a formal training program. Instead, he did something far more powerful. He put a tool belt in his son's hands and took him along to the job site. Those who knew Tom back then will tell you he was never the kind of kid to slack off or cut corners. He soaked everything in, studying not just the mechanics of the work but the deeper reasoning behind it. Why brace that particular beam? Why does precision in that joint make all the difference? Why pour effort into something that nobody will ever lay eyes on? The answers his father gave him became the foundation of everything Tom would later stand for. From those early days of doing things right the first time, a philosophy was born that would drive his career for generations to come. You've watched him work with steady hands and a calm, reassuring voice for years. But somewhere beneath that composed exterior, fans have long sensed there was more to the story. Why has Tom seemed to pull back in recent times? What has he been holding on to all these years? Now at 77, he's finally ready to talk. And what he has to say is something even his most devoted followers never saw coming. Stay with us because you won't want to step away for this one. Lexington itself played a quiet but powerful role in shaping the man Tom would become. Surrounded by colonial-era homes and centuries-old architecture, he grew up in a place where craftsmanship wasn't just admired, it was expected to endure. Every building he passed told a story through its timbers and stonework. And Tom listened carefully. His classroom wasn't a lecture hall. It was a collection of weathered job sites where seasoned tradesmen worked with a kind of precision that only comes from years of dedicated practice. For Tom, learning the trade wasn't about earning a certificate. It was about inheriting something far more valuable. A way of thinking that placed quality above all else and refused to accept anything less than the best. He didn't just receive his father's tools when the time came. He received his father's entire approach to life and work. In time, Tom and his brother Richard made the decision to stop working for others and start building something of their own. Silva Brothers Construction was the result, a company that ran on family values and a stubborn commitment to quality in an industry that didn't always reward either. Big job or small, historic restoration or humble renovation, Tom brought the same level of care and intention to every single project. People noticed. Word traveled fast across Massachusetts that if you wanted work done properly, without excuses and without shortcuts, the Silvas were the ones to call. That sterling reputation is ultimately what put Tom on the radar of the producers behind This Old House, a show already popular with homeowners hungry for real knowledge and practical guidance. What they needed was someone who didn't simply understand construction but had lived it from childhood. Tom was exactly that person. What started as a limited on-screen role grew into something far deeper, a long-running presence that carried his warmth, his knowledge, and his genuine passion for the craft into living rooms across the entire country. Fame never changed him, though. Through all the camera crews and production schedules and national recognition, Tom remained exactly who he had always been. He found his satisfaction in the work itself, solving a stubborn problem, finishing a project cleanly, watching someone else understand something they hadn't before. Viewers connected with him so powerfully not because he performed well on television, but because he was completely authentic. The Tom Silva who helped a neighbor patch a leaking roof on a Sunday afternoon was the exact same Tom Silva who stood in front of a camera explaining load-bearing walls to a national audience. Over time, his legacy quietly expanded beyond the buildings he worked on. He became a reminder to an entire generation that craftsmanship still carries weight in this world, that doing something properly still means something real, and that no matter where a person begins, whether in a small garage or a quiet New England suburb, they have the ability to create something that truly lasts. Isn't that the kind of message the world could use a great deal more of? When all is said and done, Tom Silva never set out to be famous. He never chased recognition or angled for a spot in the spotlight. He simply wanted to honor the lessons passed down to him, do his work with integrity, and share whatever knowledge he had with people who genuinely wanted to learn. And perhaps that's exactly what makes his story resonate so deeply. It was never about the applause. It was always about the work, one plank laid carefully, one beam set true, one day of honest labor at a time. Back in the mid-1980s, Tom Silva was entirely consumed by the everyday demands of running a successful contracting business. Television was the last thing on his mind, and for good reason. He had a full roster of clients, a company that depended on him, and no particular desire to stand in front of a camera. But life has a way of interrupting even the most predictable routines with something completely unexpected. For Tom, that interruption came through a casual conversation with his neighbor, a PBS television producer named Russell Morrish. It sounds almost too cinematic to be true, but that's precisely how it happened. When Morrish first raised the idea of Tom appearing on television, Tom didn't hesitate for a single moment. He said no. He was far too occupied running Silva Brothers Construction to even consider adding something like TV appearances to his plate. But Morrish wasn't looking for just any contractor to put on screen. He was searching for someone whose skill and authenticity couldn't be faked, someone who lived and breathed the work they did. He had already witnessed Tom's craftsmanship firsthand when Silva Brothers built the set for his PBS program, The Victory Garden, and he was convinced Tom's talents deserved a wider audience. So he kept the door open, even after Tom had firmly closed it. The moment that actually changed everything didn't come through a formal casting call or a carefully scheduled screen test. It happened because Morrish simply showed up unannounced at one of Tom's active job sites, camera crew in tow. Tom was in the middle of preparing a space for fellow cast member Norm Abram to film a kitchen segment when Morrish walked in, reached over, and clipped a microphone directly onto him. No warning, no preparation, no script, just Tom, his tools, and a camera suddenly pointed in his direction. And somehow that was all it took. Life rarely waits for the perfect moment to arrive. By 1986, Tom had officially joined the cast of This Old House as the show's general contractor, and within 2 years, Silva Brothers Construction had become the program's contracted building firm. From that point forward, Tom's role on the show only deepened. He took on renovation projects of breathtaking ambition and complexity. The 1887 Nantucket House started as a straightforward renovation and evolved into something closer to a full reconstruction. A 1906 arts and crafts church was transformed, beam by beam, into a private family residence. Then there was the 1721 farmhouse that had shifted a full 8 inches off its foundation due to severe rot at the sill, a structural nightmare that would have defeated most contractors. And the Manchester by the Sea project, which Tom himself acknowledged was far too ambitious for the time frame given, was somehow delivered ahead of schedule despite being projected to take 18 months. 10 months later it was done. That kind of performance under pressure says everything about the man. Tom's value to This Old House extended well beyond his physical contributions to the builds themselves. As the seasons progressed, he grew into one of the most effective teachers the show had ever featured. He possessed a rare ability to strip away the intimidating complexity of construction and present it in terms that anyone watching from their couch could genuinely follow. People didn't just tune in to see what a finished renovation looked like. They tuned in because Tom made them feel capable of understanding it. He once admitted that had construction not been his calling, teaching probably would have been, and in truth, he managed to become both through the show. His commitment to education reached far beyond the television screen as well. Tom became a central figure in Generation Next, an initiative launched by This Old House, specifically designed to address the growing shortage of skilled tradespeople across the country. Tom was passionate about the numbers. More than 5 million skilled trade positions sitting unfilled simply because there weren't enough qualified workers to take them. That wasn't just a workforce statistic to him. It was a problem with a solution, and he was determined to be part of delivering it. Who better, after all, than a man who had given his entire life to the trades? When people look back on what Tom Silva has built over the course of his remarkable career, the renovations and restorations will certainly come to mind. The precision, the problem-solving, the ability to bring order to what looked like total chaos. But underneath all of that, something quieter and more lasting stands out. This was a man who never once needed the spotlight to find his purpose, yet managed to inspire an entire generation of builders, fixers, and makers simply by showing up and doing the work with complete sincerity. One unexpected door opened, and millions of lives were quietly changed on the other side of it. But no story of real substance comes without its difficult chapters, and Tom Silva's is no different. Behind the steady smile and the confident hands that viewers came to trust, there were tensions simmering, disagreements brewing, and a set of truths Tom chose to keep private for a very long time. Till now. What he finally decided to share, and why he chose this moment to share it, is something nobody who has followed his career will easily forget. Keep watching. What viewers at home saw on their screens was warmth, competence, and an almost effortless mastery of the building craft. What they didn't see was the ongoing struggle Tom Silva faced to keep the show honest. Now in his late 70s, he has chosen to speak openly about the behind-the-scenes conflicts that threatened his place on This Old House on more than one occasion. As it turns out, protecting the integrity of a home improvement program required far more than skilled hands and sharp instincts. It required the willingness to stand firm against pressures that had nothing to do with construction. The friction began in earnest during the late 1980s and carried through the early 1990s. On the surface, observers might have dismissed the disagreements between Tom and the show's producers as ordinary creative differences. But Tom makes clear that what was actually at stake went much deeper than camera angles or editorial choices. The battles were about the soul of the program itself. Tom believed, without any room for compromise, that the work had to be shown accurately and completely. Real materials, real timelines, real challenges and real solutions. When producers began pressing to accelerate construction sequences to accommodate filming schedules, Tom saw it as a fundamental betrayal of what the show promised its audience. A house built on misrepresentation is no more trustworthy than a house built on a cracked foundation. For Tom, the principle was exactly that simple. Eventually, the tension reached a point where Tom decided he had to draw a clear line. He told the producers plainly, give him meaningful control over how the construction process was represented on screen, or accept his resignation. It was not a negotiating position. It was a statement of principle from someone who had spent his whole life refusing to do things the wrong way. The producers, to their credit, understood what they stood to lose. Tom had built something with the show's audience that couldn't be replicated or replaced, and they knew it. They agreed to give him more authority over how the work was depicted, and the show moved forward with its most essential voice intact. The story didn't end there. By 2004, the accumulated weight of ongoing production pressures had worn Tom down again, this time to the point where he sat down and began drafting a resignation letter. This was no impulsive reaction. He discussed it at length with his family, thought carefully about what walking away would mean, and arrived at the conclusion that he could no longer operate within a system that continued to ask him to prioritize convenience over craftsmanship. For a man whose entire identity was built on doing things properly, the compromise being asked of him had simply become too great. When word reached the producers that Tom's intentions were serious, they acted quickly and decisively. This time they didn't simply negotiate. They made a concrete commitment. His work would not be altered or abbreviated for the sake of runtime. He would have genuine authority on the job sites. The technical standards he had always upheld would be respected. The resignation letter was never finished and never sent. But its existence alone is a testament to how close the show came to losing the very person who gave it its credibility. The next major challenge arrived with the 2010s, when the television landscape was shifting in ways that made long-time viewers uncomfortable. Streaming services were pulling audiences in new directions, and production teams across the industry were chasing younger demographics with faster-paced, more visually driven content. At This Old House, conversations began about reducing Tom's on-screen presence to make space for fresher faces that might better connect with a new generation of viewers. For Tom, this wasn't a question of ego. It was a question of what the show fundamentally meant. Its whole purpose had always been to go deep, to show the actual work rather than a polished version of it. Watering that down felt like a betrayal of every viewer who had tuned in expecting the real thing. He pushed back without hesitation. He made the case clearly and directly. The audience didn't come to This Old House for entertainment alone. They came for the knowledge, the depth of experience, the kind of hard-won wisdom that only decades in the field can produce. And he wasn't making that argument in isolation. Long-time viewers, dedicated fans, and even members of the younger crew rallied around him. The message that emerged was unmistakable. Tom Silva wasn't simply a contributor to the show. He was the bedrock it had been built upon. It's easy, in retrospect, to celebrate Tom Silva for the quality of his craftsmanship. What deserves equal recognition is the quiet, persistent courage it took for him to keep the show truthful. The trust that viewers placed in This Old House wasn't accidental. It was protected, season after season, by a man who was willing to risk his position rather than compromise his standards. Every time you see him measure carefully before making a cut, consider the battles he had to win, often in rooms the cameras never entered, just to keep that integrity alive. His story is not only one of building. It is one of holding the line when holding it was genuinely costly. In 2018, grief arrived without warning in the This Old House family. Austin Wilson, a young crew member whom Tom had personally taken under his wing, died suddenly in the middle of a filming season. For everyone connected to the production, the loss was devastating. For Tom, it was something altogether more personal. Those close to him described a man who was visibly shaken in ways they had never witnessed before. He withdrew from conversations, grew quieter in meetings, and for the first time began asking himself whether he had the heart to continue. This was not a man wrestling with career fatigue. This was a man who had lost someone he had genuinely invested in, someone he had cared for as a mentor cares for a student, and who was now grappling with the particular anguish of a loss that no amount of skill or experience could repair. People who had worked alongside Tom for years said it was the first time they had genuinely wondered whether he might walk away. Not out of frustration or conflict but out of grief. Yet in the months that followed, something unexpected happened. Austin's own family reached out to Tom. Rather than pull away, they drew closer. They shared how much Austin had looked up to him, how often he had spoken about Tom with admiration, not just as a builder but as a person worth emulating. Those words, offered in the middle of loss, began the slow work of healing. Tom started piecing himself back together the way he had always approached a damaged structure. Carefully, patiently, one section at a time. And the question that had loomed so heavily began to soften. How could he step away when there was still so much left to give? The answer came formally in early 2025, during a closed internal production meeting. Tom, now 77, looked around the table at the people who had shared decades of work with him, and told them plainly what they had hoped but hadn't dared assume. He was not retiring. Not now and not any time soon. He would continue as lead contractor and technical consultant for the seasons ahead, with substantial projects already in motion in Westford and Ridgewood. The relief in the room was real. There was a steadiness in how he said it, the calm of a man who had passed through genuine darkness and emerged knowing exactly why he was still there. His choice to stay was more than a professional decision. It was a declaration. A declaration that the values he had always stood for, The honesty, the care, the insistence on doing things right no matter the pressure, were not going to quietly fade with his generation. Every person who had grown up watching him on television, who had learned from him that broken things can be fixed and that hard work still means something, could take something real from that announcement. Grief had tested him thoroughly. But it hadn't undone him. Like every great renovation he had ever undertaken, he came through it stronger and more purposeful than before. Tom Silva's influence has never been confined to the projects he completes or the television segments he films. 4 years now, it has been spreading through people, through the careers he has helped shape and the confidence he has quietly built in those fortunate enough to learn from him directly. That is the dimension of his legacy that tends to go unnoticed, and it may well be the most significant of all. One of the most deliberate expressions of that legacy has been his work with his nephew, Charlie Silva. Beginning in 2016, Tom made a serious and sustained investment in preparing Charlie to lead Silva Brothers construction, eventually helping him step into the role of company president. This wasn't a ceremonial handoff. Tom engaged deeply with Charlie's development, sharing not just technical knowledge but the values and judgment that make a builder truly worth trusting. Charlie's introduction to This Old House through the Arlington Arts and Crafts House project gave him a platform, and Tom's guidance gave him the foundation to use it well. But Tom's investment in people has never been limited to his own family. Across trades and across seasons, he has shown the same commitment to those around him, encouraging Mauro Enrique's expertise in finish work, supporting Jen Novata's landscape vision, helping Heath Eastman navigate complex electrical challenges. For Tom, great construction has always been a team endeavor, and his job has always included making sure every member of that team feels valued and capable. That belief in people, particularly young people finding their way into the trades, drove his deep involvement with the Generation Next initiative. Launched in 2016, the program was created to address what Tom saw as an urgent and solvable problem. A country with more than 5 million skilled trade positions going unfilled because not enough young people were being encouraged to pursue them. Tom has spoken about the simplicity of what it takes to get someone started, putting a tool in their hands and watching something light up behind their eyes. From that single spark, entire careers can grow. As an ambassador for the program, he has done far more than lend his name. He has sat on advisory boards, addressed industry panels, campaigned alongside advocates like Mike Rowe, and helped secure meaningful financial support, including a $25,000 contribution from Irwin to the Home Builders Institute. His goal has never simply been to inspire young people to dream. It has been to give them the means to build. At 77, Tom shows no interest in slowing down. Early 2025 brought his reaffirmation to fans and colleagues that he would continue as the primary contractor on This Old House, with active projects already underway and more on the horizon. He has structured his workload thoughtfully, focusing his energy where it matters most while keeping the pace sustainable. But make no mistake, he is not coasting. He is working. What continues to impress those around him is how naturally he balances respect for tradition with an openness to what's useful and new. Tom doesn't chase trends or reach for the latest technology simply because it exists. He evaluates, he considers, and when something genuinely improves the outcome without compromising the integrity of the work, he adopts it. Progress, in his view, should move deliberately and with clear purpose, not in flashy bursts that sacrifice craftsmanship for the appearance of innovation. In a culture that rewards speed above almost everything else, that outlook is quietly radical. In the end, Tom Silva's story is about something far larger than carpentry. It's about the values that make any work worth doing. Patience, honesty, a commitment to quality that doesn't bend under pressure, and a genuine desire to lift others as you go. It's about understanding that what you leave behind in people outlasts anything you can build in wood or stone. So the next time you see him at work on screen, remember that you're not just watching a skilled contractor practice his trade. You're watching a man who has spent a lifetime proving that how you do something matters just as much as what you do. He hasn't finished proving it yet. And the rest of us are better for it. With that, we've reached the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you found value in this story, please take a moment to leave a comment and subscribe for more content just like this. And for your next great story, go ahead and click on the video appearing on your screen right now.